Welcome to Bovine Banter with the Penn State Extension Dairy Team. I'm Emily Fread, and I'm a dairy educator based in Union County, Pennsylvania. Joining us today is Katie Ballard, the Director of Research at the W.H. Minor Agricultural Research Institute in Chazy, New York. Not only does Katie manage the research at Minor Institute, but she is also a dairy farmer herself. Her family milks 210 Holsteins and is located in Georgia, Vermont. Katie was also my mentor for my master's thesis focusing on episodic heat stress in dry cows and their calves. So, Katie, can you please tell us about yourself, your role at Minor Institute, and your family's dairy?
Sure. Thank you, Emily. And it's nice to talk to you again after a few years of you being in this new role that you're in. As part of my responsibilities as Director of Research at Minor, I co-supervise research staff with our research scientists. I chair our Animal Care and Use Committee, which approves all the research we conduct with animals at Minor Institute. And I also handle budget development for grants and contracts and manage the state and federal requirements for conducting research. And then our home farm that you mentioned that's in Georgia, Vermont, we're a bicentennial farm. It's been in the family since 1788. And I help out once in a while and enjoy serving as a relief breeder when my son is out of town or busy doing other things.
Great, thank you. Today we're going to be talking about heat stress in the Northeast. What is episodic heat stress and how did you coin this term?
Well, when talking about heat stress and defining the threshold when cows experience heat stress, we talk about a combination of temperature and humidity using a formula that calculates temperature humidity index, or THI. We generally consider cows to be under heat stress when THI is greater than 68. The majority of research on heat stress has been conducted in southern states like Florida and Arizona. Arizona has high temperatures, low humidity. And as you know, Florida has high temperatures and high humidity. And once it starts to get hot for the summer in both of those areas, it is hot all day and night. And essentially, the THI doesn't go below 68 for months. In more northern states like New York and Pennsylvania, we get a couple of hot days followed by a couple of cooler days where the THI is less than 68. So our cows undergo episodes of heat stress with short exposures. Does it mean our cows are less impacted by heat stress than down south? I actually think our cows may be more impacted by heat stress because they never get an opportunity to actually acclimate to the heat. Emily, I know you as a North Carolina native were much happier than me when it was 90 degrees and humid. So research has found that it takes about 2 weeks for acclimation to heat to occur, and our cows don't get that continuous exposure. So I think it is important to differentiate the type of heat stress cows are exposed to when we conduct this kind of research, and that's why I refer to it as episodic heat stress.
Can you tell us about the studies Minor Institute has conducted over the past few years regarding episodic heat stress in lactating cows?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. We started off a few years ago and worked with 4 different commercial farms that had varying degree of heat abatement. Our research was thankfully supported by the Northern New York Ag Development Program. So there was definitely a view that heat stress was an issue in Northern New York, and they wanted to focus some research on that and support it. So we worked with farms that one farm didn't have any added heat abatement, no fans. They built a new barn, had quite a bit of natural ventilation, they felt, that would suffice for the Northern New York summers. Another farm had fans only over their bedded area as well as their feed bunk. Another farm had fans and sprinkler systems over their feed bunk, and then their bedded area had fans. So we had different degrees of heat abatement. So it gave us an opportunity to really evaluate resting time, bulk tank milk. We followed that as well in terms of production shipped from the farm, as well as components of that bulk tank milk. And eventually, in some of the later years, we were able to use a technology called SMAX Tech, which is a bolus that resides in the reticulum, and we could get continuous body temperatures. I think once we had that information, it really helped us look more closely at what impact body temperature and the increase in body temperature occurred when with different degrees of heat abatement.
So, through these studies, what have you seen about how episodic heat stress affects milk production and components from these cows?
Well, just like us, cows don't really feel like eating when they're heat stressed, which certainly impacts their milk production. They also spend more time standing to help dissipate their body heat, which will also adversely impact their production. And milk components are interesting. Everybody's heard about and talks about milk fat depression. And what we saw actually is in terms of when the THI was the highest, we actually didn't see a relationship with milk fat depression and increased temperature humidity index. What we did see is that milk protein, there was definitely an impact of heat stress on milk protein. And certainly farmers are paid for both of those components and certainly production as well. So definitely, production was impacted more and milk components, at least milk protein was impacted more on the farm that had no heat abatement compared to those that had some.
That makes sense. How does episodic heat stress affect reproduction?
Certainly, reduced fertility is commonly associated with heat stress. And quite a bit of research has been conducted and shown that heat stress can adversely impact development of the egg within a follicle on the ovarian level and results in poor conception rates and maybe some early embryonic death. I've always wondered what impact heat stress has on sperm viability, though, at the time of insemination. And anyone who's bred cows on hot days has felt how hot it can be inside the cow, and sperm do not like heat. So I wonder, is it even worth breeding cows if we know their body temperatures are high? Are we wasting the cost of semen and the service fee? So this is something I'm really interested in looking into more with the use of our available technologies to monitor continuous body temperatures. So I'm hoping, I haven't seen much research done on this area, and I'm hoping that's something that we can maybe delve into a little bit more. My area of interest is reproductive physiology, so that's something that I'm kind of curious about.
What else have you learned over the years about episodic heat stress in lactating cows through your research?
Well, with the use of the indwelling system for monitoring body temperature, I was surprised to learn that the highest body temperature we find in cows over the course of the day, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. So even though it may feel cooler to us during the nighttime with night cooling, our high-producing lactating cows are still feeling the heat. So lesson learned, keep those fans running at night. So even though we feel the temperatures dropped off, keep those fans running. It's kind of interesting. It's something I deal with at home. I go out and sometimes do night checks, and I'll see that my husband turned the fans off because it was cooling down and we wanted to save on the energy cost. And I'm always turning the fans back on. And was recently talking at a producer meeting in central New York. And when we talked about this issue, you saw lots of light bulbs were turning on in heads. And one woman said, my mother-in-law is constantly turning off the fans. If it gets even the least bit cooler, she's like, I'm going to keep those fans on. So I think that's certainly something we learned that, although it's cooling off at night, those cows' body temperatures really are the highest during the nighttime.
Thanks, Katie. Obviously, lactating cows are really impacted by heat stress, but it's also important to keep dry cows in mind. And so, after Katie had seen all these impacts on lactating cows in northern New York with episodic heat stress, and then some work came out of the University of Florida showing the major negative impacts on dry cows and in utero heat stress. When I came along to do my master's, it seemed time to look at the impacts of this episodic heat stress on dry cows. And what we saw was that dry cows who experienced high amounts of this episodic heat stress during their dry period had lower milk production in the first 21 days of milk. They also stood up longer, tried to dissipate that heat, and they had a shorter gestation length. And so we also looked at their calves because the University of Florida had shown that when calves experience in utero heat stress, they were born smaller, they had a compromised immune system, and then there was this huge carryover effect where they produced less milk when they started lactating. So we wanted to look at the effects of these calves too. And what we found in New York was that these calves were not affected for what we measured. They were similar body weights, their immune system was similar. We think that this may have happened because the cows in New York's body temperature wasn't reaching the same body temperature that the Florida cows were experiencing. So their uterus may not have been quite as hot as those cows in Florida. We didn't follow those calves throughout their lifetime, though, so those calves still could have had lifelong effects from this in utero heat stress. That would be something interesting to look at. Katie, does Minor Institute have any plans to continue episodic heat stress research?
We hope to follow up with the commercial farm that did not have any heat abatement. They have since, through our research, I think helped prove to them that maybe they needed to install some fans. So they've installed fans, and we're going to be following up with that farm to change the angle of their fans to increase the wind speed. And I think something we hope to do this summer. And while not necessarily related to heat stress per se, we're going to be conducting a study this summer looking at bunching behavior. So following up what you did as a summer student, Emily, trying to get a better understanding of this phenomenon, since it does impact a lot of herds during the summertime.
That'll be very interesting. So you talked about keeping fans on at night throughout the summer, but what other advice do you have for dairy farmers in the Northeast to deal with heat stress?
My advice in our humid environment is to really focus on wind speed to cool cows. I think that's something that, farms usually have fans, and rather than spend a lot of money invested in water systems, because water, it's going to end up in our manure pits that we've got to deal with. And in certain areas, water may be an issue as far as availability. So I think, a serious wind speed, while recommended wind speeds are about 4 to 6 miles per hour, I think the farm where we saw the least impact of heat stress on their cows, they ended up having wind speeds that ranged from 6 to 10 miles per hour. They had sand in their stalls, and it was almost like a sandstorm going into that barn. But those cows, their body temperatures did not fluctuate a great deal from midnight to midnight. And that was certainly something that I felt was big benefit. It was that wind speed and how that impacted the cows and how it really protected them or kept them from being heat stressed during the summer. Another thing that we learned over these studies that I think is a good take home is water availability and making sure cows have access to water. They certainly drink a lot more during the summer and during heat events. And having those tanks that not only your linear water space, but you need to, check to see if the water refill is happening so that cows aren't spending a lot of time around water tanks waiting for that water to refill because other cows had drank it down. So maybe it's a matter of putting extra tanks in availability, having that during the summertime as cows are coming back from the parlor, giving them places where they can be drinking water and having that water readily available, I think is very important as well.
Those are all good points. Thanks, Katie, for talking with us today, and thank you to all of our listeners. If you have any further questions regarding this topic, you can email me at evf5337@psu.edu.